This episode of The Edge is brought to you by Audible.com, offering more than 180,000 titles for smartphone, tablet, and desktop. To get a free audiobook of your choice and help Trek.fm at the same time, visit audibletrial.com/trekfm. And also by Enterprise in Space, an international program of the nonprofit National Space Society. Find out how you can help science and education and become a virtual crew member aboard the NSS Enterprise Orbiter by visiting enterpriseinspace.org. And if you want to join the conversation and share your thoughts on this episode, join the Babel Conference, our listeners group on Facebook. Just type BABEL into the Facebook search field. We look forward to seeing you there.
You're listening to Trek FM.
What have you done out there on the edge of Federation space?
Welcome to The Edge, Trek FM's little tiny show all about a little tiny Star Trek show that's going to be coming out in just a little tiny amount of time. It's coming up right away, guys. Who's excited?
Woo-hoo.
Nobody.
Woo!
Yeah.
Anyways, I'm your host today, Brandon-Shea Mutala. We've got some work ahead of us to get these guys enthused, but it'll be fun. We've got a neat little topic for you. I've got three gentlemen joining me today to talk about an interesting topic. But before I tell you what topic that is, I'm going to tell you who's joining me. We've got the wonderful, talented Mike Schindler. How are you doing, Mike?
I'm doing okay. It's hotter than hell in here, but, the sacrifices we make for podcasting.
Yeah, I'm in the basement here, so I don't have to worry too much about the heat. I got a nice, cool basement.
Yeah, and you're in Canada, where they have, glaciers and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, glaciers. It's icy right now outside in the middle of summer.
Cool.
And there's moose and beavers.
Awesome.
Joining us as well, we've also got the wonderfully talented and handsome Bruce Gibson. How are you doing, Bruce?
I'm just naturally cool. That's all I have to say. And I'm in Georgia where it's hot.
But you had all that ice-cold Coke, right?
Yeah, we have a lot of ice-cold Coke here. No one drinks Pepsi. It's like a sin to drink Pepsi. Unless you're at Taco Bell. That's your only option.
Yeah.
Have you ever had a mint julep?
I think once. But no, I don't. I'm waiting to the 23rd century to venture to that with McCoy.
Okay, sounds fun. And also joining these three talented men, we've got somebody to bring the curve down a little bit. Joining us is William Smith from Trek Geeks. How's it going, buddy? Bringing us down to our nice average level.
Thank you. Long-time listener, first-time caller, I guess is the talk radio parlance. I'm excited to be here for my first ever appearance on the network, and hopefully you guys won't make it my last.
No, I'm sure we'll have you back again. No, I'm just kidding. We all know that Bill and Dan have a wonderful show called Trek Geeks over on the Trek Geeks Network, I guess.
We are your independent Star Trek podcast, so no network, although we are launching our second podcast September 25th, if that date might
that
ring
makes
a
it
bell.
a network. What would that topic be that you would be talking about on September 25th?
We will have our own dedicated podcast for Star Trek Discovery called Discovering Trek, and we're pretty excited about it. We've never done a second show before, so we're all Dan and I are both hoping to be married afterwards. Still. And
but not to each other.
No, to our beautiful brides, and we're looking forward to some great conversation.
Before we jump into the main episode here, I want to remind everybody that next week, Amy is going to be hosting, and she's going to be doing something a little bit special for you. She's going to be doing a listener feedback mailbag show. So what we have for you for homework is you need to send some messages into Amy. What are you guys looking forward to in Discovery, right? What are you hoping to see? How do you feel so far about the new format? How do you feel so far about CBS All Access or wherever you are in the world? How do you feel about Harry Mudd? How do you feel about Sarek? How do you feel about Michael Burnham? Anything else? What do you think, Mike?
I think that about covers it.
That about covers it, yeah.
And I know that Amy really, she frequents the Babel Conference, and I'm sure that she'll set up a thread on the Babel Conference where you can submit your comments or questions or whatever, But it's not so much about, asking us what we think. We want to know what you think.
Yeah.
So be sure to let us know. Next week she's going to read some of those on the air and discuss.
Yeah.
So
not questions what we think. We want to know what you guys think. This is a mailbag show. Listeners, what do you think of Discovery? What are you looking forward to?
Not what you think about us, what you think about Discovery.
Well, if you want to tell me what you think of me, that's fine, as long as it's nice.
Oh, I'll tell you what I think about you.
I'm handsome, aren't I?
It's not what I was going to say, but yeah, sure.
Okay. Well, today we're not talking about Star Trek Discovery. We're talking about television and how television has changed over the last, I don't know, how long's TV around? 500 years? Something like that. So, but, back in the 1820s, when we first had radio, clearly my numbers might be off by a decade or two.
Yeah, it's off, but keep going.
Anyways, television kind of started out, and it started out where everything was free over the air, but there was only a couple of channels, and everything was black and white. And in the 60s, well, I guess earlier in the 60s, I guess it'd be the kind of the mid-60s, the early 60s, they started to develop color televisions, and they needed programming in order to sell these crazy fandangled contraptions. And a lot of people think that, Star Trek was groundbreaking because it was like the first science fiction show and stuff, but we had Lost in Space, we had other science fiction shows around, and Star Trek though started off strong with color programming, with these bright, vivid shirts, these bright yellows, these bright blues, these bright reds. And Bill was actually texting us the other day while we were talking about this, and Bill remembers seeing an ad at some point where they were actually trying to sell televisions, and they were using Star Trek to sell color TVs.
Oh, and the ad it was a print ad. It ran a lot of magazines, and at the time, as I was duly corrected, it was RCA televisions, because RCA had the majority share of NBC at the time, the network that aired Star Trek. And what better way to rise the tide for both companies than to start, promoting your full color TV show with all these bright primary colors on, television sets that your company sells. So I was great cross marketing. It's evidence that Star Trek has always been sort of at the forefront in one way or another, and I suspect we'll get into that.
I'm just surprised Bill's that old. I had no idea that you were around in the 60s to see that ad. That's pretty impressive.
I saw it on the Googles, I'm not going to lie, although I am old.
Well, I just want to point out a piece of little trivia. Do you know the first sci-fi show to air on television in color? It was not Star Trek. It was actually the Jetsons.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yes.
Well, they would have colored it in color. Like, they would have drawn the pictures in color, right?
Yep.
But, when did the Jetsons air? Do you remember? I don't know.
I don't remember, but it was somewhere in the mid-60s.
Do you think that this was kind of a provocative way to sell TVs, like a great way to sell them or a bad way to sell them? What do you think there, Mike?
Well, I think obviously it's a good way to sell it, but I think like the thing which is really interesting is that if you sort of like look at the way that film was trending during this time period, we're just kind of starting to get into this sort of more realistic types of movies, like Bonnie and Clyde came out in 67 and everything like that. And from this point on, going into the 70s, we're getting away from like the Technicolor productions like Singin' in the Rain and stuff like that, and into sort of the more muted, realistic, quote unquote, color palettes, in like indie cinema and everything like that. And I think that it's just kind of interesting that, television, because they're trying to push this new product, basically is creating demo material for that product, which is, in a sense, making the art form sort of behind the times when it comes to, its visual aesthetic. You know what I mean? And like if you look at like The Cage and their sort of like slightly drabber uniforms and stuff like that, I kind of wonder how much of that was sort of like the original intention for the look of the show, and from an artistic standpoint, and how much of this this classic gold, blue, and red, which everyone knows and loves, is really nothing more than like you guys are saying, NBC trying to sell some TVs, And that's something that we do see, as we progress through time with various technologies and everything, like movies or TV shows or whatever, essentially becoming reference material in order to show off a product, and that's kind of weird. And, I think it's why, as we progress, you start seeing more muted colors throughout the franchise.
Mm-hmm. Right on. Well, I did a quick search here, and referring to the Jetsons there, they originally started airing in September of 1962. So that's a couple of years before Star Trek started. So after we had, color was basically one of the primary things that Star Trek was focusing on at the beginning, like these bright, vivid images that we could see. But television itself has changed quite drastically over the years. And we went from getting a few channels over the air for free to having to pay for television, having to pay for cable. Now, it was a slower transition, but you kind of see a pattern as we go along here. And a lot of people said at the beginning, when cable was making its original push into the market, was people were saying, why would I pay for something that I can get for free? Have you guys heard anything similar to that lines over the last little while?
Very similar, yes. It's interesting because cable was very prominent in rural areas where they couldn't pick up the TV stations from the bigger cities. So cable's been around almost as long as television has, but it was the bigger cities that didn't have cable because you could get reception and everything was free. And then all of a sudden, when the cable networks started coming on, the rural areas were getting the networks, and it was the cities like New York and Chicago saying, hey, why can't we get those networks? And all of a sudden there's this rush to build cable throughout the cities. And then, it's just like you're saying, all of a sudden people are like, wait, now I got to pay for TV? I could always get it free. Where in the rural areas, they were always used to paying for TV because they couldn't pick up the free local signals.
Well, I think that there's always some channels that people could get for free. Like, we lived in very rural northern Saskatchewan when I was growing up in the early 90s, basically. And we didn't have cable or satellite or anything like that. And we would get, I think it was two or three channels that we would get up there, and it was CBC that was broadcasting it. And, there's CBC and CBC French, and then I think one more. But I can't even remember right now because that was almost 30 years ago, right, that happened. But, like if you wanted more channels, you had to pay for cable. And it was this big barrier that people felt when it originally came out. This financial barrier. Why should I have to pay for something that I've been getting for free? And I remember, like, we had cable when I was growing up. We had 13 channels. We just had a coaxial cable going into our TV, and that's all that we had. That's all the TV could get, And I remember technology evolving. You would get into cable boxes, and then satellites started to come out, and people would have these large satellite dishes in their backyard. Like, I don't remember. Does anyone know what those were called? Like those giant satellite dishes?
Yeah, they were received C-band signals, so like C-band satellite dishes.
C-band satellite. Did any of you guys ever have one of those?
No.
Do you know anybody that had one?
I knew someone when I was a kid.
Did you ever go to their house and watch it? Like, how was it?
I did, because it was cool because you could watch TV stations before their on-site reporters were going on air, and you'd see them stand there, messing with their hair and picking their nose before they went on air, and we would just sit there and laugh at it. Because you were seeing everything. Everything was free. It was all in the clear. It wasn't until later that they started scrambling signals because everybody was picking up all this raw footage and all these raw on-site newscasts and even all these networks and TV shows that they started scrambling the signals, and then you could, again, like you're saying now, pay a fee to get those signals unscrambled and watch them. But I remember they would get like hundreds of just weird raw channels of sometimes like just dead air for a while.
I mean, one of the other things which is kind of like interesting about the origins of TV and the technology advancing, I mean, I think maybe the even more significant than the whole cable thing is the ability to record shows, I mean, back in 1966, you were really at the mercy of what was on when you happened to be at home. And I think that really influenced the storytelling, to a very, very large degree, in a way that we'll see change in the next couple months or weeks or whatever. But, it's been said a million times, like, the original series was kind of designed to be an anthology with standing sets because, you never knew who was going to see what. There was no way to guarantee that everyone would see all 30 episodes in the season or whatever. And because of that, each one really, truly did have to work on its own. Mm-hmm. And it really creates a different type of storytelling than what we have now, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're very right about that because, they would only have television airing at a certain time. Television shows would air at that time, and that was it. And reruns didn't really happen as well because of the amount of episodes in a season. I mean, the original Star Trek, the first season of the original Star Trek had 29 episodes in it. And if you multiply that by 2, that's more episodes than there are weeks in a year, right? So even if they re-air something throughout the year, the first one of the seasons of Twilight Zone was even like 35 episodes in it. Something like that. It's 35 episodes in its first season or something like that. Like that's a huge amount of episodes, and it's shocking because of the way that television is changing. And as we continue this discussion along, we'll see how television seasons themselves have changed, right? But so you mentioned the ability to record. I mean, I remember as a kid, and I'm sure you guys do as well, you got to record on your VCR, right? You got to set your VCR up to record. And if you're away from the house, you got to set the timer. If the power goes out, then your timer doesn't work on your VCR. And if there's a sporting event on that starts late, if something happens to go off by a couple of minutes, then you could miss the start or the end of your episode because something else ended up getting aired. And I mean, I remember when I was a kid, I would start my recording 15 minutes before the show was supposed to start, and I would end it 15 minutes after it was supposed to end, just in case something weird happened with pushing it off and delaying it or whatever. But that's how I would set up my timer when I wanted to watch a show if I was out of town.
That's really impressive because a lot of people didn't know how to use the timer, and they didn't even know how to set the clock, and so they couldn't set the timer. It would just flash 12 all the time. So that's very impressive, Brandon, that you could do that.
Okay, well, let me tell you how nerdy I was with my Star Trek. Okay, when I discovered Star Trek and started falling in love with it, I actually recorded it on VHS, and I would record it in chronological order. So like CBC television aired them in production order, and they were airing 5 days a week at 3:30 p.m. Monday to Friday. My school was done at 3:22, and I only lived about 2 blocks from my school, so I would run home and I would be able to watch Star Trek 5 days a week. Now, if something happened and I ended up missing, now they were airing the edited versions of the show, so they were only 45 minutes long, but if I ended up missing an episode, I would record 45 minutes of blank space on my VHS tape and then catch the next one. Because with a VHS tape, if anybody remembers this, if there was nothing recorded on it and you hit fast forward, the counter wouldn't go. Okay, so because there was nothing recorded there, so there's no counter. So I learned that I had to record 45 minutes of blank space on my line input so that I could know where the next episode would go. And then I would wait until it came around, and then I would put the episode in its proper order.
This explains so much.
It does.
I haven't had a chance to tell this story yet, but yes, I love my Star Trek that much. So, and I would label them. I had a typewriter. Okay, so my mom had a typewriter for some reason. And so, the stickers that came with the VHS tapes, like I would roll them in there and I would write on there, Star Trek, the original series, Volume 1. And it would be like nicely labeled. I have no idea what happened to those things. Like,
oh, no.
I had no girlfriends, but I tell you, my Star Trek was in chronological order on my VHS tapes.
That's exceptional. It really is.
Yeah.
You guys have similar experiences, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I recorded basically every episode that I could. I didn't do that. I basically used whatever episode happened to be on, but I would label them all, episode by episode, and I do it in SLP, so I get the 6 hours, and I put 5 episodes on a tape, and yeah, it was weird because like with Next Gen being on every day and everything like that, you'd sort of like be building these collections, and it was tricky though still, because like you're saying, it's not like now where everything is on demand, and if you don't even have to worry about setting up a recording. Like even if you have TiVo or whatever, you just say record all the Star Trek, and then it does, you know? Whereas, like, back then, it's like, okay, what time is this going to be on? And like you're saying, if there's, you know, a sporting event or something that can really mess things up. And even though this technology did allow for stories to be a bit more interconnected from week to week, it still did cause some problems. And I mean, Deep Space Nine, ironically, was like the one which was really problematic for me, because here in Chicago it aired on WGN, which was also the network which aired Chicago Cubs games. And for whatever reason, I'll never figure this out, but towards the end of the run, just as the show was getting serialized, they decided to move the time slot to like Saturday afternoons at 4 o'clock, which inevitably was always when the Cubs were playing. So like you literally never knew from week to week what time Deep Space Nine was going to be on. And you know, as much as we like to criticize, you know, sort of like the powers that be for not pushing the serialization and for praising them for the serialization of Deep Space Nine, I have to say that the suits were right in thinking that making something serialized will turn viewers off. Because even though I love Deep Space Nine more than any other show ever at that point, like, I literally did stop watching it because you'd miss an episode and be like, well, that's it then. How can I go on? Because, you know, I was one of Brandon's tapes, you know, and I did not want to have any blank spaces on me. You know, I would just wait until it rolled around. And, you know, I stopped watching the show. I stopped watching my favorite Star Trek show because I couldn't reliably watch it from week to week. Mm-hmm. So
that's heartbreaking, actually. I mean,
it's really sad. My first time experiencing the story on the whole was by reading the Deep Space Nine companion.
Bill's got something to say. I'll let him talk, but when he's done, I've got a story that's a little bit sadder.
Okay. In 1985, in 1985, I recorded Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan off of ABC television because we had just barely gotten a VHS player recorder in my house. And it's like, I already knew I loved Star Trek II. So one Sunday night, I sat there with my wired remote in hand, and every time a commercial came up, I would hit pause button. Except the problem was when you hit pause, the tape rolled back about 2 clicks. So I'd have to stop recording and then play and then let it go ahead about 2 clicks and then stop it so it would reverse again and then hopefully line it up. And I had that copy of Wrath of Khan on VHS for about 15 years. Now, in the middle of it was a commercial for New Coke because I anticipated unpausing at the wrong time. So in the middle of, you know, the Battle of the Mutara Nebula, there's this commercial for New Coke, and then it would go right back into the Battle of the Mutara Nebula. And it is probably my single greatest failing as a Star Trek fan.
That's funny.
But that probably had the extra scenes in it, right? Like the with
the blind as a Tiberian bat and all those. It was definitely Nick Meyer's edit for television, which I still love to this day. The new director's cut on Blu-ray comes close. But it's still not quite what I grew up with.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we were living in La Ronge, Saskatchewan, and we moved away from La Ronge, Saskatchewan in January of 97, which was, I believe, halfway through season 5 of Deep Space Nine. And when we got down to Regina, it was on a higher channel. It was on like channel 56 or channel 57, whatever it was. And in order to get that, you needed a cable box, and we didn't have one. So, you know, with Voyager and that airing at that time, like, I didn't get it. We didn't get the channels in Regina, Saskatchewan. So I had to stop watching Deep Space Nine on its original run halfway through season 5. I was so sad.
Yeah, that is a tragedy in my mind.
Agreed. Yeah,
it is. But it's interesting because, like you're saying, so now we're in the syndication era of the Next Generation and Deep Space Nine. And we were talking earlier about paying for cable. Well, as these shows are in syndication, they're on free TV. You can get them with an antenna. But most of the stations in the country were these upper UHF channels, which are harder to get with an antenna than the lower channels, which were VHF. So now you had a situation where more and more cable homes were increasing. More and more people were having cable. Therefore, these independent stations had wider distribution. More people can watch these independent stations, which opened the door to do the first run syndication, because now Hollywood could make these shows, put them on syndication, and they could be seen in majority of homes as opposed to less homes. So cable is the thing that led to the strength of independent stations, leading to the strength of first run syndication. So there is a correlation between cable and the next generation Deep Space Nine having success as a syndicated show.
Mm-hmm. So moving along, Voyager was meant to launch a network. It was meant to launch UPN's network, and that turned out wonderfully. We all know the story behind that. One of the things that Star Trek was a little bit late to the game with was high definition. And, it didn't start recording in high definition and widescreen until 2001 with the launch of Enterprise. And I personally think that this was a failing on Star Trek, but this is another part of the evolution of television, because the X-Files started doing widescreen for season 5, which was, I believe, 1998, which is the fall of 1998. Now, they weren't necessarily airing it in widescreen, but they were getting themselves prepared for it, And so when you get those seasons on DVD, season 5 is actually naturally in widescreen. And if you look at the Blu-ray transfers of the first 4 seasons, they were actually preparing for widescreen. So when you watch them on Blu-ray or streaming or whatever, like the X-Files looks like it's composed for widescreen, even though the first 4 seasons were not in widescreen. Oh, Mike's got something to say on that.
I disagree with that statement, but let's just roll past that, all right?
Okay, Mike disagrees. I don't know. I've been watching the first couple seasons on Netflix, and they look like they're pretty darn well composed for widescreen. And I'm a natural aspect ratio kind of guy.
I mean, I don't know. I don't really fault them for it too much, because I know that they said that there was talk about them doing the later seasons of Voyager and 16:9 and all that stuff. And to me, I don't know, there's something about the consistency there, kind of like The Wire, was in 4x3 for its entire run. And, there's just something about that which is sort of beautiful, that they were able to maintain the aspect ratio throughout. And then they knew that, the new show was coming, and it seemed like a good time. Actually, from what I heard, they actually started shooting it, like the first episode or couple episodes of Enterprise were actually in 4x3, and they very, very quickly, very early in the production, decided to make it 16:9. But because of that, there are some, I don't know if it was in the middle of the pilot or if it was in like a couple episodes down the road, but there are some scenes, if not entire episodes, from early in Enterprise's run which were recomposed for 16:9. But but I mean, it just makes sense. Like, you switch over to the new show, switch over to the new aspect ratio, make everything HD and all that good stuff. It's cool. I'm okay with that.
Now, television continued to change over the years, and something drastic happened in 2000 that completely changed the way that people watched television, and it was actually the fault of the X-Files. The X-Files was the first television show to be released in a complete season box set with season 1. They actually launched the idea with that, and I remember when that came out, I was completely floored. I paid $125 a season the day that those things came out. I was just floored to have them. Now, of course, you can go to the discount bin at Walmart and get the entire season for $20, but I'm not bitter. I am not bitter, because I watched those complete sets at least twice.
Yeah, I remember putting down a deposit on season 1 at FYE downtown. Like I put down like a $40 deposit in order to make sure that they would hold a copy for me. But that was amazing, and that was a game changer. It was pretty cool. Although, it's not the first time that an entire season or series was released all on video. Let's not forget that the animated series was released on Laserdisc in one complete set back in the day. I have it. It's awesome.
As a box set?
It's a box Laserdisc set with every single episode in it.
I stand corrected. And
but that was Laserdisc, I mean, DVD, obviously. I mean, that thing probably cost like $200 back in the day or whatever, But yeah, no, I mean, in terms, and there was like they did like the Hercules and the Xena. You could get those on VHS as complete seasons. They were just like these massive boxes, like this wide for all those people who are watching, and but no, I mean, obviously DVD. The compact nature of the format and everything like that, X-Files was definitely the one that sort of like set the model, which everybody follows today. And it was Star Trek that was still living in the past, releasing 2 episodes on a disc for $20 each.
Only $20, yeah.
And there's even
X-Files. That's $5 an episode only.
There's even like you can see like there's inserts in those in like the season 3 discs for advertising them doing the same thing for Next Generation with like box art and everything. They were going to do the same exact thing. And then when the X-Files came out, they're like, oh, let's take a step back for a minute and rethink this strategy.
Yep.
It's crazy.
Right. So what do you guys think of the DVD revolution of home video? Did you guys ever jump into this? Like I've got tons of box sets. Like that was a huge game changer for me. Were you guys consumers of home media like that? Bill, Bruce?
I was, especially when Next Gen came out on DVD. As egregiously priced as those ones were, I still lined up at Best Buy the night they went on sale and bought them and brought them home and binge watched them. Mm-hmm. And I look back now and go, if I'd only waited. So no, I've got it on DVD, I've got it on Blu-ray, I've got digital copies, but I absolutely started with Star Trek and then branched out into other series. I've got everything from random 80s shows to, my wife is a huge fan of Buffy and Angel, and we have those ones. But it definitely started the domino to fall for me.
Mm-hmm. Bruce?
I was never really one to buy seasons on DVD because they were expensive, and a lot of my favorite episodes I had recorded on VHS, and I would just catch the rest as they aired in reruns. But it wasn't until Enterprise Season 4 came out was the first time I bought a season's worth of DVDs, and then after that I got the animated series, and I stopped buying DVDs because I just started watching them on Netflix.
So you jumped right into the Netflix format.
Yep.
See, the fascinating thing about the X-Files box set is the season 1 of the X-Files came out when I think it was like season 7 was airing. Like the show was still airing when this box set had come out. And I remember, the following year, 24 season 1 came out in 2002. And like this is a brand new show, and so like when that one came out, I was like, holy smokes, like this show was just brand new and airing, and it just finished airing, and now I can own it. Like wow, like that was insane. That was awesome. So I don't know. It took me a long time to switch over to the Netflix. I have it, but I still kind of like to buy my DVDs and Blu-rays and stuff. I've tempered my spending over the last few years, but it took me a long time to temper that spending. That's for sure.
Well, I mean, it was really important, and like for me, with my sad story of never being able to find Deep Space Nine on TV, this was literally the first time that I got to see the entire series from beginning to end, and it was really kind of a big deal. And I would, binge watch Deep Space Nine as soon as the new season was released on DVD, and it was pretty great to finally be able to see the entire thing. And yeah, as far as like the Netflix thing is concerned, it was a hard thing to let go of in terms of physical media, but I've reached a point now where I'm just like, burn all those DVDs to the ground and let the smoke just rise up into the cloud, and my movies will exist there till the end of time, and I'll be able to get rid of all of this shelf space and spread out a little bit. I'm totally okay with it. I'm super snobby when it comes to video quality and audio quality and all that stuff, and it's gotten to the point now where I'm like, yeah, it's good enough. It's almost as good as Blu-ray, and unless I'm sitting there trying to find the compression errors or whatever, I can live with this. Totally worth it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. One important aspect we haven't mentioned is the evolution of the DVR. So once we got away from the VHS VCRs, DVRs made things a lot easier to record. So again, as Star Trek was airing, whether in first run or syndication, I had my DVR set up to do season recordings, or every time an episode aired, it would just automatically record, and I could have 50 hours, depending on the size of the hard drive of the DVR. I could have like 50 hours of Star Trek sitting there to watch at any time, and of course I'd have to make space over time, but I would delete the stuff I've watched, and eventually it would re-record them again when they would air on TV. So I think DVR makes the binge watching much easier, and to catch all the episodes, and it's just a press of a button. It's much easier than doing the tape and the VCR, and so we're setting the clock, and so it doesn't flash 12.
Yeah, I agree. There's one other transition now. We're going to go back a little bit in time to what I think is another factor that had a huge influence on the way that television has changed over the years. And for me, that's HBO. I know that a lot of people think that D Space Nine is basically like one of the first serialized things, but it wasn't really the first serialized show that I remember and had an impact to me as being a serialized. And it was one of the HBO shows. And I remember I had borrowed these all on DVD from the library. So I know like this is time-wise, it's after the fact because they were on DVD, but it was happening in the 90s. And for me, the first show that I watched that had a serialized format was Sex and the City.
All right.
I was hoping for a bit more of a laugh there, but it is a true story. I fell in love with Sex and the City. It was a great show. But then after I watched that, I watched The Sopranos, and then I started watching everything that HBO had because I'm just like, this is the greatest format ever. Like I was just completely hooked on these 12 and 13-hour season-long arcs. So, and at that time, I can't think of anything else that was telling television like HBO was at that time. Can you guys think of anything?
There was something. I mean, there was like NYPD Blue and stuff like that. I mean, there were certainly shows that did have like fairly heavy continuities, ER and stuff like that. I mean, every time people say like Deep Space Nine was the first, I'm like, what are you guys talking about? That is not an accurate statement at all. I mean, X-Files was doing it before Deep Space Nine was, and Deep Space Nine never really got that hardcore about it either. There were a lot of shows which were doing it, much more seriously than Deep Space Nine was. But I mean, certainly Deep Space Nine was groundbreaking as far as Trek is concerned. But I really liked when they were going in that direction because it signaled a change, which to me at least was welcome. And this is something which I thought was just sort of like a universal thing. Like, yeah, of course we want continuing storylines, but recently, like online and stuff like that, I've seen a lot of people sort of complaining or maybe worrying about Discovery being too serialized and not having like what would be on the X-Files, like the Monster of the Week episodes. But I mean, what does everyone else think about that? Are you excited about Discovery embracing this format, or are you yearning for Star Trek of old?
I'm excited for it because I think it is Star Trek's best shot at viability in today's marketplace. I mean, I look no further than Supergirl to see what CBS has done with a property that, had some sort of mass appeal that didn't take off the way it wanted. It spent one season on CBS. It started with some halfway decent numbers, and then it leveled off. And then CBS was like, well, we don't know if we're going to renew the back nine for this show. And then they did, and then they said, well, we think we're done with the Supergirl experiment, even though they promoted the heck out of it. Every sports telecast, you saw Supergirl ads. Every Big Bang Theory, you saw Supergirl ads. All of their top shows, you saw ads for Supergirl. And what happened? It wound up on the CW because it was a better fit for that show. And I think that probably the same thing would happen to Star Trek if it were airing on normal television. I think that to get the kind of stories and the quality we want, I think that it being on CBS All Access or on streaming of some kind is not the worst thing. At least that's my opinion.
Okay, I got a question on that because I don't quite understand what you're saying. I don't understand how a show can't fit on a network. Because, I haven't had cable in a long time, and we haven't really touched on that aspect of it. But to me, I don't care what network a show is on. I see a show, I want to check it out because of the idea of the show captures me, and I want to watch this show. So if people want to watch Supergirl, why would it matter if it was on ABC or the CW?
Well, it matters more in the sense that CBS is the number one network in the country. They have shows that, they cancel every year that would consistently be top performers on other networks. And they want to retain that status as much as they can because in the end it means ad dollars. So, when it came to Supergirl, it wasn't performing as well as they wanted. And so that's how it wound up on the CW. And I think that, unfortunately, the same thing would happen with Star Trek. Okay. Now, I could be wrong, but, if it were another network, it's entirely possible you could see Star Trek airing in prime time. But considering it is CBS and they are the rights holder, I don't think it's a bad play for them because it allows Star Trek to once again be on the cutting edge of entertainment for something. And launching a network streaming service.
I agree with you. It's really weird because it's the certain perspective that you have. If a show's on CBS and it brings in 5 million viewers, CBS and the media would claim it's a bomb. It's not working. It's not a success. Right. But if that same show was on the CW, getting that same audience of 5 million viewers, it would be a hit. It's big. It's the number one show on the CW. So it's this matter of perspective of where a show airs, whether it's a cable network or on the CW or a major network like NBC, ABC, CBS, or Fox. And now we have CBS All Access, which is weird because CBS CEO Les Moonves is saying, hey, we're going to reach about 4 million subscribers on CBS All Access. So when Discovery premieres, the most that anybody could watch would be the 4 million. Well, that's really not a lot in the scope of the pay TV audience of just being shy of 100 million. So really, it's only going to be available in 4% of U.S. households. And then what percentage of those households are going to watch Star Trek Discovery on a regular basis? But if they see an increase in subscribers to All Access, all of a sudden it's going to be hailed as a huge success. Discovery is, turning around All Access. All Access has gained some subscribers. But if it was bringing in 4 million viewers on CBS, it would be a bomb. So it's all about perspective.
I think, the perspective thing is definitely, true. I mean, as far as like how many of the 4 million are going to watch it, I think probably the answer is 4 million because otherwise, why do you have CBS All Access? But, but yeah, I mean, that's definitely true. Like when the rumors first started coming, this was years ago, there were some rumors going around that Star Trek was going to be there was going to be a new Star Trek show and it was going to be on CBS. And I remember thinking like, how? Because, I mean, this is the other thing. And the other thing about it not being a good fit for a network is, like, certain networks cater to certain demographics, I mean, CBS is the network for old people. You know what I mean? And old people, I mean, like, it's not a good fit because they're not worried about the Star Trek fans or the people like you're saying, like you, Brandon, who are going to search for, you're looking at the show, you're going to go wherever the show is in order to see the show. They're worried about the people who are tuning in for 60 minutes and who are going to stay tuned in for whatever crap they have playing after 60 minutes. Like on September 24th, Star Trek Discovery. You know what I mean? Like that doesn't seem to be like something which, I mean, and obviously they could pair it with the Big Bang Theory, which is kind of a weird, I don't know, anomaly in my mind, but still, like even then, I don't know, because I think half the people who watch The Big Bang Theory are people who are like kind of like making fun of people who watch Star Trek, if that makes any sense.
Well, I mean, I think Star Trek could work on CBS. I think the only reason we're getting Star Trek is because this is the thing to help them launch a successful CBS All Access. I mean, Star Trek Phase 2 was to launch a Paramount network. Star Trek The Next Generation was to launch their first run syndication properties. Voyager launched UPN. Discovery's going to launch All Access. They look at this as a property with a built-in audience that they can launch another entity all by itself and use the Star Trek audience to get it off the ground and get it kicking. It could be on the CBS TV broadcast network, and it may do fine, it may do well, but the only reason we're getting it is because of All Access. And that's a good thing because the pressure isn't on Discovery to perform that well and bring in a huge audience. So they're already talking about a season 2. If it was on the CBS network, they probably would not be talking season 2 at this point.
Mm-hmm. it's one of those things where, like, at first glance, I basically couldn't care less where it is or whatever. But the more I think about it, the more I think having it on like a streaming service like this opens up a lot of possibilities in terms of getting more Trek. You know, I mean, when that rumor started going around about the whole Khan thing, like, just the idea of that, like, throw out whatever that, you know, whatever the idea is, but, you know, a low budget miniseries to air, you know, let's say in between seasons or whatever of like your big show, like, it just makes perfect sense, you know, in order to keep people around, keep people subscribing. And I feel like, since it is like a paid platform, there's going to be more incentive for the network to give us more Trek, if that makes any sense. And I don't know. It makes me happy. It makes me happy. And also, I like the idea, even though it's going to cost a few extra bucks, I like the idea of not having commercials.
Oh, yeah. I'm going to pay the few extra bucks to not have the commercials. But you're right. I mean, after the 15 episodes end, they're not going to want us to all drop CBS All Access until season 2 comes back. So they're going to try to fill something in there that appeals to us, whether it's a different Star Trek series or something else that is along those lines that Star Trek fans would like to watch. So I'm hopeful we'll see a lot of good stuff out of it.
Yeah, Fuller even said, like, really early on that they were brainstorming for ways to keep people around until season 2 dropped. So yeah.
I'm stoked about the possible thing about Khan. Now, we've kind of passed the idea, but there is... So the next big transition in TV was Netflix, right, where you could pay X amount of dollars. Like, I was, up until recently for me here in Canada, I was paying $5.99 or $6.99 for Netflix. And I mean, like, honestly, converting that to American dollars, that's like 15 cents, you know, with the way that the American dollar converts right now. So it was like dirt cheap. It just recently up to $9.99, I think it was, so that I could continue with the HD. I could have stayed at the lower price, but then I wouldn't have gotten HD. So I'm like, of course I want HD. It's $10 a month. Now, with this, you get access to all these shows. They're creating original content, and they're creating this commercial-free content, this hour-long content that's basically in the same format as an HBO show. Shortened seasons, 13-episode seasons, tighter seasons with less fat on it, trim, lean television programming. And I mean, this is the format that Star Trek Discovery is going to be taking. But I've been a Netflix subscriber for quite a few years now. We've been in this house for 6 years, and we've been only Netflix subscribers that whole time. So we haven't had anything else. So you know, all these now we're not getting Discovery on Netflix in Canada. Okay, so if I want to get Netflix in Canada, I have to subscribe to something else called Crave, or I have to sign up for cable TV. But I mean, I haven't had cable TV in a long time. And in a nutshell, it's because I didn't like cable companies. I didn't like paying $110 a month when I only watched a couple of shows that were only available on the premium channels that I couldn't get unless I paid $50 for the basic stuff. So for me, I've cut the cord a long time ago. So for you three gentlemen here, like, I don't know if are you willing to say this on air? I don't know. How much do you guys pay a month for cable? Do you have cable? What do you guys have at home? And then, like, so how does CBS All Access change that for you guys? Because you guys are all in the U.S.
I'll go first. I cut the cable about 5 years ago because I was tired of paying very large unnamed cable company a ransom every month, for content I just wasn't using. Mm-hmm. So my wife and I decided, you know what, let's be smart about what we consume and let's just do it that way. So we were already Amazon Prime customers, so we have a Fire TV, and we signed up for Netflix and Hulu, and that covered most of what we watch. Well, now I also have PlayStation Vue, so I get to see some live cable channels. I'm still saving, plenty of money, and I subscribed to CBS All Access probably last month because I wanted to watch The Good Wife sequel, because my wife and I watched that show. And I'm still subscribing. So I'm happy to pay for it. I was paying at least $225 a month before, and now I'm paying, not counting my internet access, which I would have anyway, probably close to $50, and I'm happy.
Yeah, I did the math, I don't know, a little less than a year ago, and I figured out that if I were to get rid of cable and buy everything that I watch on cable a la carte, I would end up saving, like even overestimating, like let's just say that, they release 50 episodes of Rebels every year, whatever. I'm still going to be saving like $60 a month. And the only thing that I'm not going to be able to get are White Sox games. But, they're having like literally the worst season they've had, I think, in my entire life right now. So, whatever. These things happen. And then I found out that Hulu has a live service which actually allows you to watch, like live sporting events in your area. So that was kind of a big deal for me. But yeah, so I did recently just cut the cord, like less than a year ago, and I'm happy with it. As far as like CBS All Access and having to pay for this extra thing, I can understand why people are upset. And, when you start hearing things like Disney starting their own service and stuff like that, like I don't think that this is necessarily going to fly for the most part, because then essentially what you're doing is getting cable again. If you're paying for every single network individually, then you just have cable again. And if it were almost anything other than Star Trek, I'd probably be like, nah, I'm good. But it's Star Trek. And if you think about it in sort of logical terms, like $10 a month, let's say we splurge and go with the non commercial one, $10 a month for 4 episodes. I mean, I literally just spent $15 on a ticket for Logan Lucky. That's 2 hours, and surely it's going to be amazing, but that's $15 for one movie, and this is $10 for an entire month's worth of Star Trek. I can live with that expense. You know what I mean? And if I really, really, really wanted to pinch pennies, I'd wait until all 15 episodes were on, get the free trial month subscription or whatever, or pay the $6, and then watch all of them for $6. I mean, I don't know. It's not an outrageous expense when you look at like how much it costs to go see a movie,
Right. And I mean, I subscribe to the Eagle Moss Starships, and I mean, I'm paying $50 a month for 2 Starships, and I don't do anything with them. I look at them on my shelf. Like, I can't play with them. My kid broke my Excelsior. I was kind of upset. Right? So I had to buy another one for $25 because I'm not going to have an incomplete collection, right? Now, sorry, but just before we go too far, you said White Sox. I thought you were a Cubs fan.
Shut up.
Bruce, what do you have to say?
I was going to ask that too, but I couldn't bring myself to as a Red Sox fan.
When I was at the Rio for Star Trek Las Vegas, I went to a vending machine for a Coke, and it cost me $3. And when the bottle came down, it was half full or half empty, however when you want to look at it. So I went ahead and spent the other $3 and got a full bottle of Coke. So I spent $6 for one little bottle of Coke, and I thought that's a month of CBS All Access right there. I mean, I just
had it been drunk?
I don't know. I don't even know. Maybe I dreamt the whole thing. But the question you're asking is really tough for me. I could spend an hour answering that question and I'm not going to, so don't worry. I work in the industry. I've been in positions where I've negotiated with the networks to put them on cable lineups. I know the cost involved. I know the language in the contracts that's involved in getting it on there and how it has to be carried. And unfortunately, the expense of carrying all these networks on cable really helps to drive the price. I'm not going to blame it on the programming. Some of it can be on the cable company. I'm just saying in general, there's a lot of money in licensing in these networks. And now I work at a network, and so that's a whole nother story. But working in the industry, I'm going to admit it right here, I cut the cord about 5 years ago myself. As I was negotiating these deals and seeing how much money was involved, I thought, you know what, we don't watch but maybe just a few of these networks at home. And I'm just curious. I've heard about cord cutting. I'd like to try it. I've got, my wife, and I've got 2 girls at that time that were, 7 or 9 years old. And I'm going to try it and just see what happens. We'll do it for a month, maybe 2, and then we'll probably go back to cable. And I can admit, we never went back. We've never gone back to cable. And we do subscribe to Netflix and Hulu. We now have Amazon Prime. We do have Sling TV. I wanted to try that out because there was some live streaming of some networks on there. I don't know if we'll keep it. Nobody really watches it that much because everybody's used to an on-demand world. No one's really used to live TV. We have an antenna in the attic. I have TiVo boxes for DVR, so we record stuff off free TV. We're back to free TV there. And So I'm used to paying for these other little services, $10 a month roughly, and CBS All Access would just fit in perfect with that. But I will say, for years and years, I used to always hear people say, I wish I could only pay for what I want, only the channels I want. And I used to tell people, you know, it would cost you more to pay for each individual channel because they would charge you more for it, and then you would be paying as much as you pay for cable now, if not more, for 4 or 5 channels. And that's what's starting to happen in this over-the-top industry, where you're going to get your Netflix, your Hulu's, your CBS All Access. You're going to start adding them up, and you're going to say, I've subscribed to 5 or 6 of these services. I'm paying for those as much as I was paying for cable. And the other thing I want to add is there are a lot of people out there that said, I would do anything to have a Star Trek series. I would pay for it. I wish it would be on HBO. Well, guess what? You'd have to pay extra to get HBO or Showtime or Starz.
HBO in Canada was $20 a month when I started.
Right.
For the package with HBO, it was $20 just for that package, and it had 2 channels.
So think of this like a premium channel. You've got your cable bill, and you're subscribing to that premium service, and you're right. It's cheaper. It's $6 a month. Come on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the other thing about this, like on the flip side of all of this, you know, I'm not trying to be dismissive of people who feel like it's not worth the expense. You know, I mean, like, everybody has a budget, you know, and there's lots and lots and lots of TV shows which I would not be willing to pay $6 for or $10 for or anything like that. But, you know, I don't know.
Star Trek.
It's Star Trek. It's, you know, and I mean, for some people, you know, they might not care about Star Trek. You know, that we might learn that there's a lot of people who don't care about Star Trek, and, you know, Discovery will be an amazing, you know, 15-episode show and that we will remember, you know, years from now. But I don't know. I mean, if I don't know, my thinking is, like, if you're going to be listening to a podcast on Trek.fm, like, there's probably something that you're spending $6 on which you don't like as much as Star Trek. Mm-hmm. That's just my guess. And to me, I would sacrifice somewhere in order to get Discovery. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Now, Mike, you'd asked a question earlier. I think we should transition onto this topic to finish this off, is the changing face of television and how the nature of storytelling has changed with these new streaming formats. And I kind of want to take the lead on this one here. This is the aspect of Star Trek that I am the most excited for. Is this storytelling of a condensed season with no excess. I'm really excited for this format because all of the shows that I watch have short seasons, and they're hour-long shows. They've got high budgets with them. You know, I watch Game of Thrones. I watch The Americans. I watch Twin Peaks is going on right now. They've got a little bit of a longer season, but I'm really excited for the storytelling possibilities that are going to come out of this new format and how they can focus more on character development and storytelling with characters. I'm not so much looking for the action. I'm looking for the development of these people and learning to care about them. Because one of the great things about Deep Space Nine with having reoccurring characters is that some of those characters came to be my favorite ones because we got to learn a little bit more about them, because Deep Space Nine took place in basically a centralized location, so these characters kept coming up. And I think with modern storytelling, they focus more on the character development rather than the action. I know that there's some shows that have both. Like Game of Thrones is a great show that does both. But because of the larger budgets, they're capable of doing that. And while I really wish this would have been an anthology show, like that would have been my ultimate dream, with every season being a completely different storytelling possibility, like True Detective or American Horror Story. That was my dream way back in the beginning. I'm still looking forward to what is going to come out of this new venture with this format. So I don't know. I hope I'm conveying my ideas here well for you guys.
I don't know that I would have been on board for an anthology series because I don't enjoy anthology series, but that's just me.
Really?
Yeah.
Like, what about like the Twilight Zone?
I like select episodes of the Twilight Zone. To Serve Man is my favorite Twilight Zone episode of all time, but I don't get into shows like, say, American Horror Story because I want to grow with these characters over time. I don't necessarily want to hear their story over 13 episodes and then be done with them.
Mm-hmm. You want to stick with them?
I do, and I especially want that with Star Trek because, you know, we get to know these these crew members over the course of somewhere between 3 and 7 seasons, and they become part of the American mythos. They mean something to us in the end, and I feel a greater tie to them as a result.
See, American Horror Story and True Detective are two very different types of anthology storytelling. Like True Detective, each season is completely independent of each other. They've got different locations, different characters, different actors. Where with American Horror Story, they're using the same actors but putting them in different roles each season.
Right.
So they are completely different with the two of them. I stopped watching American Horror Story because I don't know, I thought the stories got ridiculous. Like, I'm just like, this is just ludicrous. I can't wait, and I hope that there's like another season of True Detective coming out, because I think True Detective is amazing. Like, I think that show's a masterpiece. And for me, Star Trek would have been the perfect universe to place an anthology series in, because you could have one season on this ship. You could have one season on this planet. You could have one season in this quadrant. You could have one season behind Romulan lines. You could have one season in the Mirror Universe. Because there's such a rich universe out there with the 700 episodes, there's so many little corners that have been talked about and mentioned that we'll never know about. Other than the novels, which technically aren't canon, but that's a whole other story, and I leave that for Bruce to deal with on literary tricks.
Maybe I fall somewhere in between. I don't know, because part of me likes to see the characters grow and change over the years, like Bill is saying, but another part of me really feels like I don't know. Whenever like one of my favorite shows, when they say like it's ending, I kind of think like, oh, cool. Like, not because like, oh, yeah, I won't have to watch that show anymore, but because I like the idea of there being an ending and something, actually like coming to a natural conclusion, and not doing, let's say, the X-Files thing where it's like, how long can we string this out? And then there's not only a drop off in quality, but also there's sort of a lack of like narrative cohesion, where you get into the comic book thing where everything is second act, and the idea of doing like an anthology show says, like, from the beginning, like, there's going to be an end. Like, we know exactly where we're going to end up in episode 15 when we start shooting episode 1. And there's something about that which really appeals to me. There's also something about like the idea that Fuller had for this anthology show, which appeals to me, and that's the idea of like starting before TOS and ending it theoretically after Next Gen. And I don't know, like I'm wondering if thematically, like the whole thing about this being so Klingon heavy makes me kind of wonder, like, was the plan to kind of like look at Klingon Federation relations like through the years until we get to a place where we haven't been before? And I like the idea of, yes, it is an anthology series. Each of these seasons is about a completely different crew on a completely different ship or whatever it is, but thematically it's all linked and it's all part of a larger thing. And I think one of the things which, we might get, especially with like the comments that Kurtzman made a couple days ago and everything, there's no reason to say that even though Discovery may continue with season 2 or whatever, there's no reason to say that you can't, in addition to that, start up another show. I mean, if you can have 15 DC comic shows on the CW, why can't you have 2 or 3 Star Trek shows on CBS All Access, Mm-hmm. So maybe we will get that equivalent, that the next series in Fuller's anthology, but just as its own separate show. I don't know. I'd like to see an anthology. I think it would be cool, but I think it's cost prohibitive, because just think how long it's taken to get Discovery off the ground. They have to build new sets, costumes, hire the actors. If you're going to do that every season, there's going to be delays. It's going to cost more money. Right now, all the sets they built for Discovery, all the costumes that are made, all the props can be reused in the second season, third season, and so on and so forth. What I'd like to see, but I'd still like to see an anthology and a continuing series. So I guess the analogy I'll use is Star Wars, and the fact that we have the Star Wars saga movies that continue the storyline of Star Wars, but then there's little offshoot movies like Rogue One and the new Han Solo movie. In similar ways, I'd like to see that with Star Trek. Have Discovery go several seasons,
but maybe there is a one-season Khan story that's, and another season of something totally different that's anthology that maybe doesn't quite take as much sets and production value in as they're putting in Discovery, but enough that, you can shoot Khan out in the jungles somewhere and they don't have to build the set, and kind of have the best of both worlds. Isn't that an episode of The Next Generation?
I
Never heard of it.
Okay.
Yeah. One thing just to kind of add to that, Bruce, that's definitely something which, I've thought about too, and makes perfect sense as to why they wouldn't do an anthology show, the cost of the sets and everything. But I do think it's really interesting, and I wonder whether or not this was intentional. I kind of think that it was. But the production designer who was hired at the beginning of this show to design the sets is Mark Worthington, who's the same guy who designed American Horror Story. And as I understand it, he's kind of known for taking environments and, redressing them or whatever and making them other things for other seasons or whatever. And I'm wondering if that was Fuller's intent. Let's hire this guy because this is something that he does and he, gets nominated for Emmys for or whatever, and see if he can do that with Trek. I'm wondering if that's an idea which was built into the show when they were building those sets. I guess we'll never know.
Yeah, it could be.
Well, is there any other topics here, any other things that we haven't covered that you guys would like to mention about the evolution of TV and how it's changed storytelling and how we think it's affected Discovery?
I think that maybe 10, 15 years from now, we'll be talking about the next advance and we'll have forgotten about Discovery, and Star Trek fans will probably be complaining about that too, to some degree.
What? Star Trek fans are complaining about something?
Allegedly. You can't prove that.
Okay.
Allegedly. Excellent. Right on. Gentlemen, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. However, the changing face of television is not the only thing we've been talking about here on the network. So take a quick listen to this clip and see what else you may have missed elsewhere on Trek FM.
Previously on Trek.fm, Saturday Morning Trek.
This episode is the only Star Trek that they used to only watch with me. Like, they had no interest in Star Trek except for this episode. If I said Star Trek, they'd say, Tribbles, oh, let's watch that Tribbles where they get real big and sits in Kirk's chair. They saw the live action one. They didn't, they kind of liked it, but they always went to the animated one.
Standard Orbit.
I was really hoping that Quinto would have a tie-in to, when the Hobbit trilogy came out, a few years ago. I was like, oh, they might tie into that, and Quinto can have a remix of the Ballad of Bilbo Baggins. They didn't quite go there, did they? So
no, they did not. They did not. But, there are certain things that you can, I guess, mirror or remake. That is not something that should ever be remade.
The 602 Club.
As I mentioned previously, completely blind, and not having known this history about him wanting to do a Tolkien-like world, I didn't get that at all. That's just nope.
And introducing The Edge, a Star Trek Discovery podcast.
What have you done out there on the edge of Federation space?
Welcome to The Edge, Trek FM's brand new podcast where we dive into the final frontier of the newest Star Trek series, Star Trek Discovery, the first Star Trek series to be on air in 12 and a half years, something like that.
And that's what else is happening on Trek.fm.
Excellent. Well, I hope you guys had a lot of fun talking with us today. It's been a blast. Before we sign off, how about you tell us where you can be found? Bill? Where can people find you when you're not listening to you here on Trek FM?
When I am not listening to all of the amazing shows on Trek FM, you can find me on Twitter at TrekGeekBill or at TrekGeeks, either one. I usually float between the two accounts. Or if you want to happen to find out more about the Trek Geeks podcast or Discovering Trek, you can head on over to TrekGeeks.com.
Excellent. Right on. I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. It'll be nice to hear lots of people. There's going to be no shortage of Discovery talk. However, we all know that the two best places to find Discovery Talk are going to be The Edge, followed closely by Discovering Trek. Isn't that right?
Sort of like 1 and 1A.
Yeah, 1 and 1A. 1A, 2B.
I got it.
Good, okay, good. Somebody did. Bruce, when you're not trying to blow up the USS Enterprise, where can people find you?
Well, you can find me on Twitter at Admiral_Rex, and you can find me here on Trek FM with Dan Gunther doing literary treks. And when I'm not doing that show or listening to Trek Geeks, I am doing the Star Wars Report podcast at StarWarsReport.com.
Now, we're doing something fun next month on Literary Treks. Do you want to tell everybody about it if they want to get prepared and maybe tune in?
Oh, yes. I'm glad you mentioned that. So we are preparing for Discovery on Literary Treks, and Brandon helped brainstorm this great idea. We're going to review the novel Mud in the Eye leading up to Discovery, and we're also going to read Sarek, that novel. So those two novels lead into Discovery, and then later we'll compare. We'll talk about the novels, and then once Discovery premieres, and Brandon doesn't know this yet, we're going to have Brandon back on briefly to talk about how we think those novels fit into what we've seen on Discovery. And then, of course, the novels, Desperate Hours comes out by David Mack, and he'll be on the show to talk about his novel. And then the comics from IDW come out in October, and we'll probably have some of the people from IDW come on and talk about those comics. So there's a lot of Discovery going on Literary Treks this fall. Tune in. We'll see you there.
Excellent, right on. And Mike, where can people find you, perhaps possibly drinking Singari 63 while this episode is dropping?
Yeah, you can find me right here on Trek FM doing a show called Stage 9 where we talk about the people who make Star Trek, and we do talk a lot about Discovery on that show and talk a lot about the people who are going to be making this show, so be sure to check that out. You can also find me on thenerdparty.com doing a show called Great Shot Kid, which is just Stage 9 but with Star Wars pretty much. And then you can find me on commentarytrackstars.com doing commentary track stars, and you can find me on the talkfilmsociety.com doing a show called Soderbergh 2828, and episode 28 is coming out this week, where we look at Steven Soderbergh's new movie Logan Lucky, as well as a review of his brandy, Singani 63, where I will be revealing a new recipe which I've come up with, which is Soderbergh related, so be sure to check that out.
Excellent. Well, everybody should check out Soderbergh 2828. It's currently my favorite podcast to listen to. I have a blast. I love it. I think it's great. I've been following along, watching all of Steven Soderbergh's films, and it's great. I think you and Marcelo do a great job over there, so it's a lot of fun. Check it out. And I'm looking forward to Logan Lucky coming out right away, and then maybe you guys will cover that iPhone film that he just created.
Absolutely. And Mosaic, everything that he does from here on out, we'll reunite to look at.
Excellent, right on. Well, my name's Brandon Mutala. You can find me here on the network. At some point, I'm going to be finishing up Melodic Treks with 2 new episodes. I've just been so busy with work right now, and I'll get those last 2 episodes out eventually here. You can find me also on Warp 5, which is our show all about Enterprise that I host with my friend Floyd. And you can find me over on the Fandom Podcast Network with my friends Chris and Tom, where we cover Alfred Hitchcock movies with Good Evening, an Alfred Hitchcock podcast. So that's about all. I guess anywhere else you want to find us would be the Babel Conference, which is BABEL. Type that into the search field on Facebook and ask to join, and we'll let you right on in. And you can talk to us all about Discovery and tell us your crazy ways that you used to record Star Trek onto VHS or Beta or whatever you had, back in the day. And it's a lot of fun. We'd like to thank our patrons. I can't believe how many we've got already. This is amazing. And we have got ourselves 5 associate producers of The Edge already. So we want to send a big thank you to Norman Lau, Tony Robinson, Thomas Puleo, Lisa Slack, and Shoaib Mirza. I hope I'm saying everybody's name right there. Thank you so much, everybody. Your support of our show helps us. Your support of our show helps our network, and we couldn't do it without you. So thank you so much, everybody, for everything that you're helping to do to get this show out to all of the listeners. If you'd like to help us keep all of our shows coming to you each week, you can become a patron of the network on Patreon. Please visit patreon.com/TrekFM. That's patreon.com/TrekFM to get all the details. Perks include early access to episodes, exclusive content, producer credits, including sitting on a special roundtable with Mike Schindler, which just happened last week, and they talked about Discovery over there, and that'll be coming out very shortly. We really appreciate any support you can give us, and hope you'll join the team. Again, you'll find the details at patreon.com/TrekFM. Well, join us again next week find out what we've been doing on the edge of Federation space.